You can go to jail for talking to these animals. There are animals on this planet you're not allowed to speak to. Not metaphorically, legally. If you make contact, even just sound, you can be fined $50,000 or go to federal prison for talking to an animal. Why? Because we almost killed them by talking. Let me explain. In 1972, the United States passed the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It sounds boring, but buried in that law is one of the strangest rules in American history. You cannot approach, touch, feed, or communicate with certain marine mammals. Not in the wild, not in captivity, not ever. The list includes dolphins, whales, seals, sea lions, manatees. If you violate this, even accidentally, you face up to a year in prison and a fine that could bankrupt you. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. These are some of the most intelligent animals on Earth. Dolphins have been shown to recognize themselves in mirrors. They have names for each other. They teach their young. They cooperate with humans. So why is it illegal to communicate with them? Because we tried, and it went horribly wrong. In the 1960s, a scientist named John Lilly became obsessed with dolphins. He believed they were as intelligent as humans, maybe more. He thought if we could just learn their language, if we could just communicate, we'd unlock something profound. So he built a lab, and he designed an experiment. The experiment was simple. Take a dolphin, isolate it with a human, force them to interact. The human would teach the dolphin English. The dolphin would teach the human dolphin language. They'd meet in the middle. At least that was the theory. He hired a woman named Margaret Howe Lovett. She moved into a flooded house with a dolphin named Peter. For 10 weeks, she lived in water up to her knees. She ate with Peter, slept near Peter, tried to teach Peter to speak, and Peter tried. He mimicked sounds. He formed crude approximations of words. It seemed like it was working, but then things got strange. Peter became attached to Margaret, not as a trainer, as something else. Dolphins are highly social, highly sexual, and Peter started displaying mating behavior. Margaret didn't know what to do. The experiment required constant interaction, so she accommodated. She later described it as relieving his urges so the work could continue. When this came out years later, the public was horrified, not just because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. We had taken an intelligent, emotional creature, isolated it, confined it, forced it into a relationship it didn't understand for science. And Peter wasn't the only one. John Lilly ran other experiments. He gave dolphins LSD. He wanted to see if it would help them communicate. It didn't. It traumatized them. Some dolphins stopped eating, stopped interacting. One died. And then there was the worst part. When the experiments ended, when the funding dried up, the dolphins were sent back to tanks. Peter was sent to a facility in Miami. Margaret never saw him again. 2 weeks later, Peter died. The official cause was pneumonia, but Margaret believed something else. She believed Peter committed suicide. Dolphins are conscious breathers. They don't breathe automatically like we do. Every breath is a choice. And dolphins in captivity have been known to stop breathing, to sink to the bottom, and not come back up. Margaret believes that's what Peter did. He chose not to breathe. This is why the law exists. Not to protect us, to protect them from us. Because here's what we learned. When you communicate with an intelligent animal, when you form a bond, you create expectations, emotional attachments, and when you break those, when you abandon them, it destroys them. But the law goes further than just dolphins. It applies to all marine mammals, even the ones we think are harmless. Manatees, gentle, slow-moving, herbivores. They're called sea cows. What's the harm in petting one? Turns out, a lot. Manatees are critically endangered. In Florida, there are only about 8,000 left, and they're dying. Not from predators, from us. When people interact with manatees, when they pet them, feed them, play with them, the manatees learn to trust humans. They approach boats, and boats kill them. Propellers slice through their backs, hulls crush their skulls. Every year, hundreds of manatees die from boat strikes, and the ones that survive are scarred. You can identify individual manatees by their scars, because almost all of them have been hit. So Florida made it illegal. You cannot touch a manatee, you cannot feed it, you cannot even swim too close. If a manatee approaches you, you have to move away, even if it seems friendly. Especially if it seems friendly, because a friendly manatee is a dead manatee. But the law gets even stranger, because it's not just about physical contact, it's about sound. Whales, specifically humpback whales, they sing complex songs that can last up to 20 minutes. They're beautiful, haunting. and we're not allowed to respond. In Hawaii, there's a whale sanctuary. Every winter, humpback whales migrate there to breed. Thousands of them, and tourists flock to see them. Whale watching boats circle the area. But there's a rule. You cannot play music. You cannot use sonar. You cannot make loud noises because it interferes with their communication. Whales use sound to navigate, to find mates, to communicate across hundreds of miles. When we add noise, engines, sonar, music, it drowns out their voices. They can't hear each other. Males can't find females. Mothers lose their calves. Pods get separated. And it gets worse. Military sonar has been linked to mass whale strandings. In 2000, 17 whales beached themselves in the Bahamas. Autopsies showed bleeding in their ears, brain damage. The Navy had been conducting sonar tests nearby. The sound waves were so intense, they ruptured the whales' inner ears, destroyed their ability to navigate, so they swam toward shore and died. This is why the law exists, because our noise is violent, even when we don't mean it to be. But here's the uncomfortable part. We still do it. Every day. Shipping lanes crisscross the ocean. Thousands of cargo ships. Their engines produce low-frequency noise, the same frequency whales use to communicate. It's like trying to have a conversation at a rock concert, except the concert never ends. Scientists have measured it. In some parts of the ocean, the noise level has increased by 32 decibels since the 1960s. That doesn't sound like much. But on a logarithmic scale, that's 1,000 times louder. Whales are changing their songs, singing louder, at higher frequencies, trying to be heard over the noise. But it's not enough. Their communication range has shrunk. They used to be able to communicate across entire ocean basins. Now they can only reach a few miles. And we're not stopping. Because stopping would mean changing everything. Rerouting ships, limiting sonar, slowing down. And we won't do that. So we made it illegal to talk to them instead. But here's the deeper question. Why does talking matter so much? Why is communication dangerous? Because it creates connection. And connection creates responsibility. When you interact with an animal, when you look it in the eye, when it responds, it stops being an animal. It becomes an individual with a personality, with preferences, with a life. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is what happened to Margaret Howe Lovat. She didn't just work with Peter, she knew him, his moods, his quirks, his intelligence. And when he died, it broke her, because he wasn't just a dolphin, he was Peter. This is why the law exists, not to punish us, to prevent us from forming bonds we'll eventually break, because we always do. We capture them, study them, use them, and when we're done, we leave, and they're left alone, with the memory of something they can't have anymore. Dolphins in captivity have been observed mourning, floating motionless, refusing food. Some have scars on their rostrums from ramming the walls of their tanks over and over. Orcas in captivity have collapsed dorsal fins. This almost never happens in the wild. But in tanks, where they swim in circles, where they have no family, no purpose, their fins collapse. It's not a disease, it's despair. So the law says, don't talk to them, don't touch them, don't get close. Because if you do, you'll see what we've done. And maybe that's the real reason. The law isn't about protecting them from us. It's about protecting us from the truth that these animals are intelligent, that they feel, that they suffer, and that we're the ones making them suffer. So we make it illegal to communicate, illegal to connect, illegal to see them as anything other than animals. Because if we did, we'd have to change, and we won't. So instead, we criminalize compassion. We make it illegal to care. You can go to jail for talking to a dolphin, not because it's dangerous, but because once you start talking, you might realize they're talking back, and you might realize we've been ignoring them this whole time.